Next, from Springfield, we attend a committee hearing discussing a bill proposed by Representative Christian Mitchell that would create a constitutional amendment allowing for a progressive income tax. This runs about 10 minutes.
Constitutional amendment, so be sharp, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I come before the committee to present House Joint Resolution Constitutional Amendment number 59, which would send a question to the ballot that would allow us to eliminate the flat tax structure that we currently have in Illinois and ask the voters whether or not they would be willing to consider a different structure that would allow for a graduated rate, which would mean lower rates for lower incomes and higher rates for higher incomes. Currently, 33 states and D.C. have a progressive income tax, a fair tax. As many of you know, if we tried to impose the type of flat tax we have in Illinois nationally, you'd be to the right of every Republican in Washington. This gives us the flexibility to cut taxes on working families and ensure that revenue is based on ability to pay. Right now in Illinois, if you count sales taxes, property taxes, and other consumption taxes, middle-class families pay twice as much as a share of their income compared to the top 1%. This flexibility, assuming that the voters selected it, would give us the flexibility to finally design a tax system that is fair. That is all this amendment does, is put the option to the voters to elect a fair tax system. I appreciate the time, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Mr. Sullivan.
Representative, so there's two parts to the whole concept of going to a graduated income tax. Yours is the first part that has to happen first, and that is the voters have to decide whether they want to change from a flat tax to a graduated tax.
Correct.
And so from there, we have a trailer bill that has been passed out of this committee by Representative Lang, House Bill 689, that sets into statute what those rates would be. Is that a fair
That's correct.
discussion? Now, we had some discussions yesterday between the millionaire's tax and Representative Lang's bill and how that would work. I guess what was discussed is those could change over time. And so what is put forth to the voters as your bill is being discussed, should it make it to the ballot, and we're talking about this to the voters, we'll be talking about a top rate of 9.75 for that amount of money above $1 million.
That's according to that proposed rate structure, which, as you heard both from the sponsor and from the Speaker of the House, could potentially change if, for example, the Millionaire's Amendment had passed yesterday.
Okay, so anything could happen. We could add the millionaire's tax, and so the top rate above $1 million would be 12.75, or we could choose to change that if we wanted.
Or you could choose to lower it. I mean, that would be sort of at the will of the General Assembly.
Okay, so all this would be the will of the General Assembly. Yours is just procedurally to the people of Illinois. Do you want flat? Do you want progressive?
That's correct. It would be a ballot question.
We also had a couple other issues that went on yesterday to let the people decide how to tax themselves in regard to property taxes. Do you not think that's, I see that you voted against that. Why would we not give people the ability to raise or lower their property taxes?
So it's my understanding that the legislation yesterday was a property tax freeze, which, as I understand it, could potentially limit the ability of local governments to raise the revenue they need for the services that they require. I just don't necessarily think that's policy the General Assembly should be setting. That is, again, a freeze.
Well, the policy was, well, we're going to just leave it the way it is, and if you want to change it, go to referendum.
Well, I think if folks wanted to lower it, for example, at their local government level, they could have done that as well. I think that we're a democratic republic. We elect representatives, and those representatives make some decisions for us. In this case, because of the way the Constitution is set, we cannot currently make that decision, and the voters would have a chance to change that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Keith Statz. I'm the director of the Tax Institute of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce. We're here in opposition to the graduated income tax amendment. We believe that the current flat rate broad-based tax in Illinois represents sound tax policy that was wisely put into place by the drafters of the Constitution. This amendment would eliminate the flat rate requirement for individuals and corporations. It also retains the current 8-to-5 ratio in the Constitution between the corporate income tax and the individual income tax. And from this proposal, it's unclear how that ratio would continue to operate in a graduated income tax rate setting. Under the current structure, the more income you earn, the more tax you pay. The current structure puts forth a stable tax base. The graduated income tax rate, graduated income tax, if it were adopted, would result in a more volatile tax base. High-income individuals and corporations have variable income rates, and this exacerbates the effects of recessions like we had in 2008, 2009. It's only necessary to look at the experience of California, which has had a graduated income tax for many years, to see the impact of that rate structure on the budget in bad times. One of the advantages of the current flat rate structure is, frankly, it makes it difficult politically to raise the income tax rate because you have to raise the rate on everyone. You can't just go in and increase the tax rate on the rich or on corporations, however you want to define the rich. And under the current structure, there are some things that are put into place to lessen the burden on lower tax rate individuals. I would point out the earned income tax credit, which provides a credit and a refund in certain situations for lower income people. There's also the exemption in current law for retirement income that protects low-rate seniors. Business owners who structure their affairs as S corporations and sole proprietorships are going to be adversely affected by a graduated income tax rate structure because they're going to be taxed as individuals on the income from those businesses. And they're going to be subject to those high tax rates in good years. But in bad years, unlike the case of corporations, they're not going to be able to carry forward their net operating losses to the bad years to smooth out the income level between the good years and the bad years. The current legislative proposal that's out there, Senator Lang's bill, promises a tax cut to over 99% of taxpayers. But as has already been discussed, there is nothing that precludes the General Assembly from one, not adopting that proposal, adopting a different proposal, and modifying that proposal to increase rates and add brackets. And for these reasons, the Illinois Chamber of Commerce stands opposed to this constitutional amendment. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Representative Mitchell, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel. As we wanted to talk to you about the proposal to change the state income tax from the flat tax that it has been written in the Constitution to a progressive tax. It's often billed as a millionaire's tax, but at what level of income were it to be changed in the Constitution, would a higher tax take effect?
Well, Representative Lang has a proposal out there that I support where people filing jointly, a married couple, for example, would not pay more until they've made over $750,000, which is a pretty good amount of money. The same would be true for businesses that file as individuals. But ultimately, what this is about, what we passed today, is about asking the voters whether or not they want to be able to tax lower incomes at lower rates and higher incomes at higher rates. And I think that the voters are going to say yes.
Why do this at all? What's wrong with our current tax?
Well, the current flat tax system we have is highly regressive, and what it means is if you are a middle income or low income earner, when you count in sales taxes, property taxes, other consumption taxes, in this state, middle class people are paying twice as much as a share of their income compared to the top 1%. That's not only wrong, it's also ineffective for the state because much of the income growth we've seen over the past decades has gone to top earners. We're asking those folks to pay a little bit more for the infrastructure that they and their businesses rely upon.
If that's the case, how would lower income people be taxed were we to go to a progressive tax? Would we change their tax structure?
So the proposed rate, according to Leader Lang, would actually lower taxes for 99.3% of people in the state, including lower earners who would, I believe, go down to 3.5%.
So marginally lower on their income. I guess it would still be, though, regressive to the extent they would still, the lower income people still be paying more on a percentage basis of their income than a higher income, right?
Well, the system would ultimately be one based on progressivity. And again, because you're talking about marginal income, the lower your income got, the lower your rate would be, as opposed to the higher your income got, the higher your rate would be. So I think it's a much fairer way to do it.
What about we won't keep you too much longer, the argument that it's going to have also an impact on some of the businesses, on those who are S-corps, change the ability so that it might have a negative impact. And some critics would say what we're trying to do is improve the business climate in Illinois, and this would take us in the opposite direction.
Well, if you are a business that's making $750,000 a year in profit, that all partners are making that much money, perhaps you're not so small. And what I would say is businesses disproportionately rely on infrastructure, roads to get their bridges to and from market, an educated workforce, a higher education system to turn out folks who are going to make more money and buy more of their products, as well as be better skilled workers. So we're asking those folks potentially, if this passes and if the voters decide it can work, to pay a little bit more for the infrastructure that they rely on and that the rest of the state relies on as well.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.